Hey guys, so today I thought we would go and talk about the Sony PlayStation Vita, which a few days ago, by the time I'm recording this video, on February 15th, 2022, the system turned 10 years old for its North American release. And looking back at that, that makes me really sad, but let's go and talk about it. So the Vita, clearly Sony's second portable game system, the successor to their very successful PlayStation Portable, which that system, looking back at it, it sold around like 81 million units. And, you know, for being Sony's first handheld back then, that is a very good, like, sales numbers, especially when you consider that Nintendo, for the longest time, and even now with the Switch, that they've always just dominated the handheld market overall. So anyone new coming into the market, they would be going up against serious competition. And Sony with the PSP, they like came in swinging with that, and they sold a lot of units for it. Though looking back at it, there was many different reasons why it was successful. Though, but regardless with those sales numbers, like clearly Sony should make a successor to it, and that's what we ended up getting here. That before the system came out, before like its reveal in 2011, I think it was E3 that year, during like its like development phase, it was known from Sony as NGP, or Next Generation Portable. Their goal with the system was they were aiming to like fix a lot of issues people had with the PSP. That when they were eventually revealed it at, I believe it was E3 2011, that then former Sony Corporation Chairman CEO Kaz Hirai, he revealed the handheld here, which we saw right here as the PlayStation Vita here, obviously. Right off the bat, some notable improvements that they made was 2 analog sticks. Because we all know the PSP it just had a single left analog stick, which didn't suit well a lot for people because it like hindered some gameplay possibilities, of course. But with the Vita, they fixed that, of course. They added like a front facing camera and a rear one as well. These were nothing but gimmicks, in my opinion. They even added a back touchpad here as well too. That this whole section was just like a basic like touch input as well, though the truth is this as well like turned into a gimmick. In all honesty, there were very few games that actually utilized this, but it is what it is. A big improvement though they made, and also big improvement over like all of Nintendo's handhelds, with the exception of the Switch, of course, was they had a capacitive multi-touch screen here. Prior to the Switch, all of Nintendo's handles for like the DS family was capacitive touchscreen, that you could only have like one finger touching it, but with the Vita, it was multi-touch here, and that was like a big improvement over that. And the screen on this device is beautiful. It is an OLED display that even playing games on this screen, like it still looks absolutely gorgeous. Another big improvement they did, the one thing that was a big issue for the PSP was it used its own unique media, which was known as the UMD, which was basically like a tiny disc that, as a result, they had to put like a whole mechanical optical drive back there, that as a result, with all those moving parts inside of it, that would really drain the battery. Thankfully, with the Vita, though, they switched over to using like regular game card slots, like all Nintendo systems has ever done. That made like a lot of people really happy. Though, as much as I love like the UMD, it was a much better option to go with for the Vita, though, obviously. And yeah, that's how it went. Though during that same reveal event, though. It was mostly like a mixed reception. Like they showed off the hardware, of course, and the amount of like developers that they had behind the system. But I remember they were going to have like 2 models of this system. One, it was going to be a Wi-Fi model, and the second model was like a Wi-Fi and 3G model. when they revealed who their carrier was, they were going to be partnering with AT&T as their mobile carrier for 3G, and they just got booed from the crowd. It's hilarious looking back at that. Yeah, with as great as the hardware is, sadly the overall sales for this system by the time that I'm recording this video, according to VG charts, the Vita is estimated to have sold around 16 million units. Yeah, that is a big difference compared to 81 million units of the PSP. And like the only good thing you could say for the Vita sales, it did better than the Wii U. It's the only good thing you could say about it, and that's barely much. So what happened with it? I believe there's like some two big reasons why the system failed. Number one was the price. This system for the 3G model, it was $300 at launch, and that's what this model is right here. And the Wi-Fi model is also $250. But one thing that Sony did that was so idiotic was they decided to use a proprietary storage media, which you had to get these at launch or else you weren't going to be able to play any games. Was they used this proprietary memory card right here. This dinky little card, which was such a big hindrance to this system. This is a 16 gig card right here. I have a 64 gig in this PlayStation TV right here. That's the highest that they ever released for them. So what was the problem with these? These were super expensive. Like at launch of the system, the highest you could get was a 32 gig, and you had to pay $100 for a 32 gig card. You heard that right. $100 for 32 gigs. Like, even back in 2012, that is ridiculously overpriced. So, why did why did Sony do this? Well, from like statements, I suppose, that we heard from them, that the reason they went with these memory cards was so that way developers had a known fixed data transfer rate for these cards, so that way they don't have to worry about customers getting like a slow micro SD card for their system that would like hinder the performance of the system. And another thing was piracy. One of the big things that really hurt like the PSP, at least from getting long-term support from third-party developers, was piracy. So Sony was doing like a lot of preventative measures of people trying to jailbreak these systems, though these days that's no longer a thing now. So yeah, understandably why they did all that, but it didn't work out at the end of the day. Because say like you just get the Wi-Fi model, that's $250 right there. You have to get a memory card with it, and I don't remember like the prices for like the other cards, but I want to say maybe like an 8 gig stick, which probably most people got, you would have to pay maybe like $20-$30 for that. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that, if you guys know what the original MSRP prices for the cards were. And plus you have to get some games with it as well, obviously. You possibly could be close to $400 worth of stuff, and maybe you getting accessories for this as well. Compared to at that time, the 3DS already dropped its price from $250 to, I think, to $170 or $180 it went down to. And yeah, that is much, much cheaper, obviously, compared to the competition. The second thing is marketing was terrible for this system. Though leading up to the launch of the Vita, Sony was putting a lot of effort into like marketing this system here, despite like their decision for like their 3G carrier and the memory cards that really annoyed people. But everything else beside that, though, the leading up to the launch was like awesome for this system. They revealed a lot of launch titles for the system. In fact, this system probably is one of the best launches Sony has ever had for any gaming platform ever. To me, it might be their second or third best. But And at launch, you had access not just to Vita games, you had access to a bunch of PSP games, despite you couldn't use UMDs on there, but if you had any downloaded titles on PSN, you could play them on the Vita right away from the get-go. And all of like future titles coming out for the system in its first year were amazing. In fact, some of its best games that came out in its first year, though, which was pretty awesome, but it's like after they launched the system, it's like they stopped marketing it overall. The only times I recall that they talked about it was, say, like E3 2012, 2013 to reveal stuff that was coming to the system. But then after that, they like didn't bother with it anymore. So it's like some people didn't know that it exists, and even for us that did know what existed on it, we didn't know what games was on it at all. Some of like the best games that the Vita had was never marketed at all. Kind of sounds familiar to like other systems that didn't sell well at all. I'm sure you guys may remember. So yeah, it's really, really unfortunate because as I always state, like the Vita to me is the Dreamcast of handhelds, where it didn't sell enough at all. Though with the exception of the Dreamcast, like it was selling good for like its year and a half that it was on the market, at least in North America. If it survived longer, it definitely would have sold a lot more than 9 million units. But it's kind of like comparable to the Vita, to where like the fan base or the community behind this platform is so huge and really, really passionate about it. Because you look at systems, say like the Dreamcast, the Saturn, even like the TurboGrafx 16, those systems didn't do well at all when they were relevant in the market back then. But nowadays, the fan base behind those systems is staggering. That they're still, so for like the Dreamcast especially, it was still getting like new games from independent developers, and just like the community for these systems just grew over time. The Vita is like one of the biggest I have ever seen for like the amount of passionate people I see who talk about it often, whether if it's on like YouTube or the countless amounts of websites I've seen dedicated to this system. So yeah, if you're wanting to get into the system, the community behind it though is awesome. I really, really love like chatting with people who have a Vita, what their favorite stuff on it was, and all that. So yeah, that's the community overall, really, really awesome. And one thing to note, the Vita's like its golden years for sure was from its launch to like mid 2014, because Sony, besides like them not marketing the system at all, after like mid 2014, that's when they just stopped supporting the system in terms of like releasing first party exclusive games for it. Then afterwards, you got nothing but pretty much like indie games for the rest of its lifespan overall. It's still got amazing indie games like in those golden years like I mentioned there, but yeah, it's such a shame. Like the creators of the system, Sony, it's like they were releasing good stuff for it in its first few years, but it's just after 2014, because like the sales just like were not doing well at all. They just dropped it entirely. Sadly, the prices for the memory cards never ever went down. They only did like one discount on them, and that was also when they revealed the 64 gig memory card, which again I have in there, but that was only released in Japan. But they were still so expensive though that throughout like the system's lifespan, those memory cards like almost never came down in price after Sony did that first price drop on them. So it's just a system that felt like it was just doomed from the start, but the people who got into it, though, really, really love this system. So yeah, other than that, I will talk about like some titles here. So these are some like notable titles that the system was mostly well known for, and also one of these here is like I do have like a nice personal story behind it too. First one, this is a launch title, Uncharted Golden Abyss. This is a full-blown Uncharted game with Nathan Drake on the Vita. It's crazy to think that this was a launch title. It's got like Nolan North as Nathan Drake. The gameplay is the same as like all the other Uncharted games, so if you're a fan of that series, you have to try this game. It's still a pretty affordable game too, thank God. Next one is Tearaway. This was made by the same developers as Little Big Planet, who I believe was Japan Studio, though sadly they're no longer around. Rest in peace, Japan Studio. Tearaway is a really, really good game that like shows off what the system is capable of. It used both like the cameras and the back touchpad in like fun, creative ways. And I know that they did like a re-release of this game on the PS4, which I think was called Tearaway Unfolded. It's just, to me, the game was more suited for the Vita because that's what it was originally designed for, was to like take advantage of the hardware of that system. Now this game, this was like the last Sony first party title that they made for this system, and thankfully it's a really, really good one. But then again, it's just like after this release, Sony just stopped supporting the system. But thankfully this game is really, really awesome, and I highly recommend it. It's called Freedom Wars. If you're a fan of games like Monster Hunter or like God Eater, you would love this game. Basically, it's an anime-style post-apocalyptic, futuristic setting this game has. Your character is sentenced to like 1 million years in prison, and the way that you get out is you go on like these missions for this corporation, and you have to take down like these massive future like mech type monsters, if I recall. It's been a while since I played this game though, and then also I've only played it for like 4 hours, but I really enjoyed my time with it though. Yeah, I highly recommend you get this game. It's so much fun. Sadly, back in December 24th, 2021, Sony shut down the online servers for this game. Awesome Christmas gift that was there, Sony. Thank you. Another great title. This is definitely a showpiece game for the system, was Killzone Mercenary. This game it did take good advantage of the Vita's hardware that now that it has dual analog sticks, they can make a proper first-person shooter on the system. And thankfully, they decided to do that with Killzone, and this is a really, really good game. I argue this is one of the better games in the series overall. It's a very good, say, like pick up and play quick mission types of games, what have you. It's very arcadey too, with some of its gameplay aspects as well. Highly recommend it if you do get a Vita. Another game here is Gravity Rush. This was a new IP that Sony made for the system. You play as like this girl named Kat that she has this unique ability that she can control gravity, that she can just like float in the air and just like zoom off into like the distance, or like attack like these shadow like beings, what have you. Very, very fun game. It's got like a nice kind of like comic book art style to it as well. They did do a remaster of this game on the PS4. In fact, getting a physical copy of that game for that system is notoriously expensive somewhat. And they did make a Gravity Rush 2, but that was only on the PS4 though, because they clearly like doing it on the Vita wouldn't make sense because of a failing platform. Still a great game nonetheless though. One thing the Vita did back in its like early years, they really tried to port like a lot of like big AAA quality games to the system. Sometimes that worked great with, you know, some of those titles right there, but in some cases that didn't work out so well. Good example of that is Borderlands 2. I remember when this game was coming out, it was like getting some hype for some reason, but when it came out, this is not a good version of this game. Even that I don't care for Borderlands much at all, but this is not a good version of this game. Textures are clearly very low res, but the frame rate though, oh my god, I swear it's like less than 15 frames per second, like 80% of the time you're playing this game. So unplayable. It was impressive that they managed to get the entirety of Borderlands 2 on the Vita, but there are much better ways to play this game though. One thing the Vita did that was clearly what defined the system throughout its entire lifespan was indie games, of course. Like, before the Switch came out, it's like everyone touted the Vita as like the perfect indie game system, because like you can take it on the go with you, and with how indie games are in general, they are like very quick pick up and play types games. They're very simple and all that, not as complex like AAA games are, of course. So as a result, we got like a lot of different indie games that a lot of it got released on the PSN store, and all of it's still very worth picking up. One of them of note is Child of Light. This game was published by Ubisoft, but it still like looks like it plays like an indie game. An interesting note about this game: this physical copy of it is the only version of it that exists. Yeah, for some reason, if you want a physical copy of Child Light, you can only get it on the Vita. It's the main reason why I got the game, because I'm not much of a fan of Child of Light, truth be told, as much as a big fan I am for JRPGs, but wasn't getting much into this, but I will give it another shot one of these days, though. But I mainly picked it up, though, because it's the only known physical version of this game. This system, also, this was the first time that I ever played Terraria. Terraria, it's a very, very good fit for this system here. Though I will say, like, the PC version of Terraria is probably the best version, obviously, but this is still a great version nonetheless. And still, I much prefer Terraria over Minecraft, personally. That's just me. I'm a much bigger fan of this game overall, with the amount of content that it has. Plus, the mods for it, to me, are just way more interesting than what has come out for Minecraft. But hey, that's just me. Next one, and one of the better indie games on the system, as well as like many other platforms too, is Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight, it got like so much praise when it came out all those years ago, and even for this version, all of like the new expansions they released for the game, they still like updated it on the Vita here, because they promised that for every single version of Shovel Knight there was. So if you want like the entirety of like Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, you can still get it on the Vita. It's a great fit for the system. One thing that the Vita started for like a new trend that we still have today was with like independent publishers coming out for indie games. If you recall, you may know a certain company called Limited Run. They were the first companies that did that, where the idea is normally indie games, they don't have the budget to print like a lot of copies of their games compared to a AAA release, right? But publishers for the last few years, they have come out and said, it's like, hey, we will fund you guys, so that way we will print off like all these physical copies for your game, so that way we have a physical release of this game, so that way it's always preserved now. Limited Run games started that, and the very first games they released for it was on the PlayStation Vita. Their very first game was a game called Breach and Clear, which Limited Run, they were like a development team. I think they were called Mighty Rabbit beforehand. And Breach and Clear was the game that they made, as well as Saturday Morning RPG. And those were like the first releases they made for the system. I think only like 1,000 copies of both of them were ever made for the system, which is like the case for most Limited Run's releases. And after that, many other publishers have come out since then, like Super Rare Games, VGN Soft, IM8-Bit. Plenty of like companies come out and just doing like physical releases for indie games, which is awesome though. Though that can be kind of mixed on some people, because when it comes to collectors, like if you want to go for like, a full set, that means you have to be on top of these games as well if you want to consider these part of like your full set and all that. That nowadays it's just gotten really out of hand, that there's so many different publishers releasing many different games, and that you have to like pick those up when they're up for pre-order, because afterwards they never print them again, and they don't print much to begin with, so the cheapest they're ever going to be is when they were originally up for pre-order. But that's mixed, and depending on who you ask for that. I still think it's cool though, because we get physical releases of these awesome games. that the only one that I have from Limited Run, it's it's called a Dragon Sinker Descendants of Legend. It looks like a really interesting JRPG type of game, kind of like the older Final Fantasy games. I just got this because it was like really cheap online that I found. And it is sealed too, though. I really like that. This is the only Limited Run release that I have for the system. I would like to get more if I can get it for the right price, but it's not high on my priority list, though. One other company that was really supportive for the system was Play Asia, because they did create like their own publishing studio called East Asia Soft. Sorry, and it's very similar to like Limited Run. They would make like indie games that make them have just physical releases, and one that I got from them is this game called Xenocrisis. This is a really nice Contra top-down bullet hell type game, or shmup game. Highly recommend it if you are really into those genres. And I really like they totally ripped off Jill Valentine's Stars uniform right there. Still looks pretty cool nonetheless, but being really creative right there, guys. One series that I was introduced to on the system and has become one of my favorite horror series was Corpse Party. Corpse Party, if you're unfamiliar, it originally was an RPG Maker game, but it's a horror game, though, not an actual RPG game. The first few games, they were released on the PSP, and playing like through this whole series is really, really awesome. Like, the story always hooks me. I love the characters in it. It's a combination of just like a walking sim where you make some choices to make sure you get the right ending so you can move on. Some games, they're also like visual novels as well, so keep that in mind if you want to get into the series. But yeah, they did release like the third game here as part of like the main storyline. It was exclusive to the Vita for many years. Though honestly, it's one of the weaker titles in the overall series, in my opinion. They did release the whole series on PC though, so you don't have to like have a Vita to play this whole series. But if you ever do get the chance, though, do recommend you try it on the system though if you ever get into it. And one thing I forgot to mention, they did like inevitably, I think it was in like 2014, is when that they released their revision of the Vita right here, which was basically called the Vita Slim. And as the name would imply, it's like a slimmer version of the system, lighter and whatnot. They expanded the grips in the very back here so that we don't accidentally touch the back touchpad here, because it was like really, really small compared to the original OLED models. Like, hopefully you can see that. It's like really, really tiny compared to the amount of space you get on the slim version. A very big improvement they made with this system was they used a micro USB port here for charging compared to the OLED model, which was this bigger proprietary cable here, which is never a good idea to do that at all. But the biggest controversial thing that either makes or breaks this system over the OLED is that it uses an LCD screen instead of an OLED display. So therefore the colors, they're not as vibrant on this screen here, and it's also not as like bright, I notice, compared to the OLED model. But it still looks fine though. In fact, if you like soft mod this system, just put homebrew on it, there is a way that you can improve the picture quality of the LCD screen on here. Highly recommend you do that if you do get a Vita Slim though, to put homebrew on it. They also did release the PlayStation TV. Originally, it released as the PlayStation Vita TV in Japan, and then like months later, they then released it internationally. This is one of the biggest missed opportunities that Sony has ever done. This would have been like a perfect like little device that you could get to have like not just your Vita, PSP games, but a lot of like your PlayStation 1 catalog as well. But once again, it's like when they released this, it's like they completely forgotten about it. The support for this thing like did not last at all. And I remember I got this on the day that it launched, and not like months later, this thing was already say like $30-$40 in the clearance bin. that it wasn't until like Vita modding got popular for the last few years, that's when the price for this thing just like started skyrocketing all of a sudden. But yeah, those were like the revisions that they did for the system, that it was like after the Vita Slim, that's when Sony was changing their marketing, that they were making this as like a accessory to the PS4, because you could still do remote play on any of the Vitas, OLED, as well as the Slim model here, and that's still supported to this day. I'm surprised they haven't like discontinued that at all, but it's still there. But the last game that I want to talk about here, no, I'm jumping around here, sorry, but the last thing I want to talk about here, this game is really, really special to me. Because when I first got the Vita, it was back in, I think it was early 2013, I think it was. I went to my local GameStop, and I don't know what drove me to do it, but I traded in my 3DS as well as all of the games to it so I could get a Vita. I honestly don't know what drove me to do that, but I do remember that I was almost not playing my 3DS at all. But seeing the amount of games, of looking into the system's library at that time, that really intrigued me on the system, and so therefore I jumped into it. And looking in hindsight, back then, I'm really glad I did. So when I first got it for the first few months, I really enjoyed for like the first few games that I got for it, and then I started looking into what are considered like the best games for the system, until I found this right here, Persona 4 Golden. Most people will probably tell you this might be the best game on the system, my favorite game on the system, without a doubt. Persona 4 Golden, it's a remaster of the original Persona 4 that came out on the PS2 back in 2008, and while this came out in 2012, same launch year as the system, which was pretty awesome. This is without a doubt one of possibly my favorite modern day JRPG, with the exception of maybe Final Fantasy VII Remake, but yeah, this game, I can't recommend it enough. If you love JRPGs, you haven't played this game, please, you must. You have to try this game. It's so good. But one other great thing that this game told me was it's thanks to this game is how I was introduced to anime. Because beforehand I would watch like Dragon Ball Z with my brother, and like Pokemon, just like whenever this stuff was on, we would just randomly watch it. But I never knew like the term anime, though. It wasn't until that after, when I was playing through Persona 4 Golden, that I wanted to look more into this game. Then I found out they made a Persona 4 the animation. It's like, what does that mean? Then that's when I discovered what anime was, and since then, besides YouTube, it has become my preferred type of media for watching entertainment. I've never looked back at live action stuff since then, because in my opinion, 95% of it is garbage. That anime just fits more of my taste for what I want out of like watching content, besides YouTube, of course. But yeah, it's thanks to this game that, with the amount of memories I have with this, and now I did buy this on PC for my friend at Brightheart, and we've been playing it through it. It's his first time, and I've like told him constantly, like, you have to play this game here, it's so good, until I just screw it, like, I'm buying you the game so you can finally play it. And just, yeah, recently I've been watching him play through it, though, and man, it's been such a fun time. So Brightheart's like, I hope this game ends up being like one of your favorite JRPGs, because God, I love this game so much. But yeah, those are some highlight titles I have for the system. It is such an underrated system, deserved a lot more love and respect that it originally got back then. But it's just Sony just dropped the ball with like the whole memory card issue, that it didn't take until like a few years earlier that fans finally fixed that, to where we have now made a micro SD card adapter right here, though it does require that you have to soft mod the system, which is easy to do, though. It's like I'll link to Mr. Mario's channel. He has great guides showing you how to basically put homebrew on the system. Very, very good tutorial videos that I highly recommend you do watch those. But yeah, thanks to this adapter, you can get this adapter for maybe like $5 on Amazon and just put in whatever size micro SD card you have in here. So not only is that like vastly more affordable, but you also get a lot more space than what the biggest we could get with the memory cards, which was 64 gigs, and today that is just pathetic. But that's like one thing of just like the community, the fan base for this system for the last few years has just come up with a lot of just awesome fan-made stuff for it that really shows more of what this system was capable of back then. That even besides that, as I said earlier in the video, the community for this system is just huge and highly passionate. Like a great example here. This is a book made from the YouTube channel Too Old for Gaming, from the guy named Sandeep Rai. I hope I said your last name correct there. But he made like a nice book here, a book series explaining like the overall history of the system. He even has like a new one coming out here, which is kind of like I want to say like a more of an overview of the system's lifespan in like one book, what have you. That took me into like his third one right here that I did contribute to this on the Kickstarter campaign for it. So, and just reading through these, like it gives you like a great overall history of the system, some of its best titles, not ranked just from him, but also the overall community. That the fan base behind the system is one of the best I've ever seen amongst any other platforms in the industry. So if you want to jump into the system now, do it sooner rather than later, because again, there's only 16 million roughly of these systems out there. And just over the years, it's not going to be as widely available online on like third-party sellers. So as a result, the system will get more expensive. It is starting to creep up there a little bit for just like the system alone. But the games already, though, they've already like pretty much doubled in price since compared to the last few years. Because now the system has kind of become like a collector's item in some cases. But if you are going to pick up the Vita, another thing I suggest, I highly recommend you do like soft modding for it, or like jailbreaking or homebrewing it. Again, I'll link to like Mr. Mario's channel so you can like find his videos to get tutorials on how to do that. And just the stuff that you can do with this system once it's soft modded is pretty awesome, honestly. That getting the system today, though, it just makes sense to do that, honestly, because eventually the online stores for the system will be shut down. They were going to last year, but Sony reversed their decision on that. But they are stripping features away from the store, though. That making purchases on it has become like a pain. But just still getting games for it overall, it's just expensive somewhat. But nonetheless, though, it's still like an amazing experience nonetheless, no matter which of these models that you get here. I just can't recommend the system enough. So I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. I appreciate if you would share with others. Do a comment below if like you got a Vita. What are your memories with it? What are some of your favorite games for just your overall thoughts on it? So yeah, that'll do it for this video, guys. Please subscribe for more content like this in the future. Until then, I'll see you next time.